She's a mother desperate for help from the state for her severely mentally ill son. Help, she says, no one is providing while her son suffers.
Sadly, we've heard from scores of parents and loved ones of those suffering from a mental illness who say Michigan's treatment of the vulnerable is like a third world country. 7 investigator Ross Jones joins us now with his latest report. Ross?
Carol and Stephen, good evening. Tonight, state officials say they are making progress in addressing some of the systemic problems we've exposed in Michigan's mental health system. But to many suffering with a mental illness, they say care has never been worse. Almost since birth, Kelly Abdullah's son Jacob has had the deck stacked against him. For much of the 16-year-old's life, he has suffered from mental disorders and illnesses that would cripple most adults.
We're both caught in this vicious cycle that never ends. There's got to be a better way.
Jacob suffers from bipolar and post-traumatic stress disorders, and for the last 4 years, he has tried to hurt or kill himself dozens of times. And he's been in the hospital how many times?
About 2 dozen. Maybe a little more. He's gone after sharp objects in the house. He's tried to get into medications. Everything has to be locked up in a lockbox.
Jacob has been in and out of hospitals so often that for the last year, his mom hasn't been able to hold down a full-time job. So keeping your son alive is literally a full-time job.
Full-time.
She has taken Jacob to hospitals all over southeast Michigan, and with almost no improvement. A week before our interview, he had just gotten out of the acclaimed University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor.
They released him approximately 14 hours after admitting him, while he was very loudly telling him he was still suicidal, that he didn't feel safe going home just yet, that he thought he might still hurt himself. They sent him home with him telling him that he wanted to die.
Kelly says doctors told her they weren't the right facility to care for Jacob.
If it was me making the choice to take him out, I'd have CPS at my door investigating me for medical neglect. Who's looking over their shoulders?
I think that there are plenty of cases where somebody was released and it was the wrong choice.
And how do we fix that?
Well, and this, I don't have the answer for, you know, on these toughest of the tough cases.
For nearly the last 2 years, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley has headed up Michigan's Mental Health and Wellness Commission, which last year produced this lengthy report pointing out the weaknesses in the state's mental health system. We expected it would mention the revolving door system that Jacob and so many others have been suffering through. It didn't. This is not a small problem, and in fact, it's not even a new one. But I read the 35-page report, and I don't see that problem addressed anywhere in it.
Us as a society, not just in Michigan, hasn't quite figured out yet is when is a person's mental illness to the point where you are going to take away or restrict their freedom, and how long can you do that for?
While the report didn't directly address the revolving door problem, Calley says it does pose solutions, like creating shorter-term housing where patients could stay for as long as a month or as little as 2 days. But it did not recommend increasing funding for the state's 4 remaining psychiatric facilities, like the Hawthorne Center in Northville. It's Michigan's only facility for juveniles with a capacity to serve 118 patients. Do you know what it's funded to hold?
I don't have the number. I know that that most of the hospitals have a capacity that is a little bit bigger than what the current allocation of resources
is. It's funded for less than half, 55. Is that okay to you?
You know, my Aunt Mary was in a mental institution for 2/3 of her life. They are horrible, horrible places.
But it wasn't for Jacob. His mom said the Hawthorne Center gave him the best treatment of his life. Jacob spent 3 months there until he was told there was no more room.
That time was probably the most effective care that we got, because they really did take their time, play with the medicines a little bit, watch him, and see how they affected him first. If you can't keep them in the hospitals, then there's got to be something else. We can't just simply let them go home to be miserable, because I know how special he is, and I will not give up. If they want to give up, they can go ahead. I won't.
A spokeswoman for the University of Michigan Hospital System could not comment on the specifics of Jacob's treatment, but said they only release patients if there is not clear evidence that they pose a danger. Now, tonight at 11, our investigation continues. In wake of our reports, the governor's office created a special task force to address some of the very failures we exposed. But why did it take so long? Our investigation continues
tonight at 11.
I remember this was much ballyhooed a couple of years ago. The Governor's Commission was founded. What has it accomplished?
Well, as one judge told me, they've taken steps, but they're all pretty much baby steps at this point. They've done things like getting the word retarded taken out of the state law, but they've also set aside $14 million to try to implement some pilot programs that they're hoping could do something, and if they're successful, perhaps they'll expand them.
Well, hopefully that'll work.
Yeah, for the Lieutenant Governor, it's clearly personal, so you think with him driving this thing, something's going to change.
Hope so.
All right, thanks, Ross.